Breathe in. The air you take for granted once made gods and monsters of Earth's smallest creatures. 300 million years ago, the world's lungs were swollen, with oxygen thicker, richer, deadly. In the dim light of primordial forests, insects the size of hawks hunted above reptilian predators. But what gave life also took it away. Tonight, drift into the haunting stillness of the great oxygen disaster and witness how air itself nearly erased life forever. Listen now and breathe slowly. Feel the air enter your lungs thin, precious, measured. Now imagine. Imagine breathing liquid starlight. Imagine each breath thick as honey, sweet as nectar, heavy as the dreams of sleeping gods. This is how the world once breathed, 300 million years ago, when the earth was young and drunk on its own abundance. The sky hangs low tonight, closer than it should be, pressing down like a gentle hand upon the endless green. There is no moon, not yet, not in this ancient time, only the soft phosphorescence of rotting logs and the amber eyes of things that hunt in perpetual twilight. The air itself glows faintly, shimmering with moisture, and something else, something alive. You cannot see the horizon through the mist. There is no horizon here, only the breathing wall of green that rises and falls like the chest of a sleeping giant. Ferns tall as cathedral spires sway without wind, their fronds whispering secrets in a language older than words. Between their trunks, shadows move, not shadows of things, but shadows that are things, breathing the same thick air, sharing the same heavy dreams. This is the Carboniferous world, the age of coal and giants, when oxygen flows through the atmosphere like wine through water. 35% of every breath is pure fire, pure power, pure possibility. Your human lungs would burn, your human heart would race until it burst. But you are not human here. You are witness, you are memory, you are the watching silence that remembers when the world learned to breathe too deeply. The swamps stretch endlessly, mirror black water, reflecting a sky the color of old brass. Steam rises from the surface in lazy spirals, carrying the scent of growth and decay, birth and death, braided together like lovers' hair. Every drop of moisture in the air tastes of chlorophyll and copper, of roots drinking deep, and leaves exhaling dreams. Scale trees tower above the ferns, their diamond-patterned bark scarred by the claws of things that no longer have names. These are not trees as you know them, they are green towers, breathing spires, lungs turned inside out and planted in the earth. Their leaves catch fire from lightning and burn, like candles for days, weeks, months. The smoke never clears completely. It hangs in the heavy air like incense in an ancient temple, seasoning every breath with the taste of sacrifice. Listen. Can you hear it? The breathing. Not the wind, there is little wind in this thick air, but the breathing of the world itself. Every leaf, every fern, every moss-covered stone inhales and exhales in perfect rhythm. A vast green lung pulsing with life. The oxygen flows like blood through arteries of bark and stem, like prayer through the lips of the faithful, like fire through the dreams of dragons not yet born. In this air, giants walk. Dragonflies the size of seagulls patrol the mist, their wings throwing rainbow shadows on the water below. Their compound eyes reflect 1,000 different versions of this green cathedral, 1,000 different angles of the same impossible beauty. They hunt by sound, by vibration, by the subtle changes in the thick air that surrounds them like a second skin. Centipedes long as your arms scuttle through the undergrowth, their many legs keeping perfect time with the world's breathing. Their shells gleam like black armor, like obsidian knives, like the carapaces of gods who have forgotten how to die. They fear nothing in this air, nothing small, enough to fear, nothing weak enough to run. And beneath it all, beneath the breathing, and the growing, and the endless green reaching toward a brassy sky, something stirs. Something vast and patient and hungry. The earth itself, perhaps drunk on its own exhalations, giddy with the poison of its own success. Every tree that grows makes the air thicker. Every leaf that unfurls adds another drop of fire to the atmosphere. Every breath feeds the breathing, and the breathing feeds the breath, in an endless cycle of creation that feels too beautiful, too perfect, too dangerous to last. The air tastes sweet here, too sweet. like fruit on the edge of rot, like honey that has fermented into something stronger, something that burns the throat and makes the heart race. You can feel it in your chest, this ancient atmosphere, pressing against your ribs like eager hands, filling your lungs with liquid gold that is almost too rich to process. This is the first breath of the Age of Giants, the inaugural inhalation of a world learning to breathe fire. The oxygen that flows here will build empires of green and bone, will fuel the growth of monsters and the dreams of gods. It will feed the endless appetite of trees that touch the clouds and insects that rule the sky. But tonight, in this eternal twilight of the carboniferous swamps, all is possibility, all is potential. All is the held breath before the symphony begins, the pause before the storm, the silence before the screaming. The earth dreams in green, and its dreams are heavy with fire. Dawn comes slowly here, if it comes at all. The light filters down through layers of leaves and mist, like honey through cloth, amber and thick and pregnant with shadows. There is no sun in this sky, only a pale glow that suffuses everything, turning the world the color of old gold, of cathedral windows, of dreams half remembered. You stand now at the edge of the true forest, where the swamps give way to dry land and the breathing of the world grows deeper, more deliberate. The air here is so rich, you can taste it on your tongue, metallic and sweet, like copper pennies dissolved in nectar. Each breath fills your lungs with liquid fire, with the concentrated essence of a world drunk on its own exhalations. The trees rise before you, like the pillars of a vast temple, their trunks wider than houses, their crowns lost in the perpetual mist above. These are the club mosses grown massive, the horsetails transformed into giants, the simple plants of earlier ages drunk on oxygen until they tower like monuments to their own impossible success. Their bark is diamond-scaled, geometric patterns that catch the amber light and throw it back in fractal rainbows. Between the titans, the undergrowth writhes with life too large, too strange, too beautiful for the thin-aired world you know. Ferns uncurl like the hands of sleeping gods, each frond broad enough to shelter a family, each leaflet edged with silver dew that never dries. The ground beneath them squelches with the footsteps of things that have no names, only breathing, only hunger, only the endless patience of predators in paradise. A sound echoes through the heavy air, the whisper of chitin against bark, the soft scraping of something vast pulling itself through the undergrowth. You follow the sound deeper into the green cathedral, your feet sinking into the soft loam that is part soil, part decay, part the breathing earth itself. There in a clearing where the mist hangs like silver curtains, you see it. A centipede longer than a crocodile, its body segmented in perfect mathematical precision, each segment gleaming like polished obsidian. It moves with the fluid grace of oil poured across glass, each of its countless legs finding purchase on the soft earth with delicate precision. The creature's antennae wave slowly through the thick air, tasting the molecules of oxygen and moisture, and prey scent that hang there like invisible fruit. Its eyes, clusters of jewels set in armored sockets, reflect the amber light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Too complex for human comprehension, too beautiful for mortal sight. It pauses in its hunting, this titan of the undergrowth, and for a moment you can feel its awareness touch yours like a gentle electric shock. It knows you are here, this witness from another time, but you are not prey, not predator, not anything it understands. You are memory watching memory, dream observing dream, the watching silence that remembers when giants walked the earth and breathed fire with every exhalation. The centipede continues its hunt, flowing between the ferns like living shadow, like nightmare given form and purpose. Somewhere in the mist ahead, something small and warm-blooded moves with quick, desperate steps. The predator follows with infinite patience, its body rippling through the undergrowth like a wave of midnight, its breathing synchronized with the breathing of the forest, the breathing of the world. Above, in the canopy lost in perpetual twilight, other giants move through their aerial kingdom. Dragonflies wheel and dive through the thick air, their wings beating slower than they should, holding them aloft through sheer abundance of atmosphere. Their shadows fall like blessings on the forest floor, dark crosses that slide between the ferns and disappear into the deeper green. One descends now, hovering just above the mist, its wings throwing rainbow fragments across the amber light. It is beautiful beyond description, 6 feet of iridescent membrane and compound eyes, of predatory grace and alien intelligence. Its body gleams like polished bronze, like liquid metal, like the concentrated essence of sunset and storm. The dragonfly's head turns with mechanical precision, its 1,000-faceted eyes taking in every detail of this green world, every movement in the undergrowth, every ripple in the thick air that might betray the presence of prey. It hovers there, for a long moment, wings beating with the rhythm of a slow heart, before banking into the mist and disappearing like a dream upon waking. The forest breathes around you, each tree inhaling and exhaling in perfect synchrony, each fern adding its voice to the great chorus of photosynthesis that fills the air with liquid fire. You can feel the oxygen building, accumulating, becoming denser with each passing moment. It presses against your skin like eager hands, seeps into your clothing like perfume, fills your lungs with golden weight. This is abundance beyond measure, life feeding on life, feeding on the very air that sustains it. Every breath makes the air richer. Every leaf makes the forest thicker. Every giant that grows makes room for larger giants, hungrier giants, giants that breathe fire and dream in green. But in the distance, barely audible above the forest breathing, comes another sound. The soft crackle of something burning, the whisper of smoke threading through the heavy air, lightning perhaps, finding fuel in this oxygen-drunk world. Fire, born from the very abundance that created it, feeding on the same rich air that feeds the giants. The titans continue their ancient dance, predator and prey, moving through their green cathedral with deadly grace. But the air grows thicker still, and in that thickness, something stirs, something patient, something hungry. The forest dreams, and its dreams are heavy with fire. In the cathedral spaces between the titans, where the light falls in golden shafts, and the mist moves like slow prayers, the true rulers of this abundant world hold court. They are not the giants of earth and bark, not the centipedes that flow like midnight rivers through the undergrowth, not even the fish that swim through air thick as syrup in the swamp pools. They are smaller, these lords of air, but in their smallness lies a terrible magnificence. The dragonfly hangs motionless in a shaft of amber light, its wings spread like stained glass windows in the green cathedral. 4 feet from wingtip to wingtip, larger than any bird that will someday sing, larger than any bat that will someday dance in thinner air. Its body gleams like burnished copper, like liquid bronze poured into the mold of perfection itself. Watch how it breathes not through lungs as the land-bound giants do, but through a network of tubes that thread through its body like silver rivers through a copper landscape. The oxygen flows directly into its muscles, its organs, its very cells, each breath bringing pure fire to fuel the engine of its flight. In air this rich, it needs no heart to pump its blood, no complex circulation to carry precious gases through its tissues. The abundance feeds it directly, intimately, like a lover's whisper in its ear. Its compound eyes, 10,000 lenses arranged in perfect geometric arrays, see the world in fragments and rainbows, in ultraviolet signatures and polarized light patterns, invisible to lesser creatures. Each lens captures a different angle of reality, a different slice of the thick air that shimmers with heat and moisture, and the endless exhalations of the green world below. The dragonfly's head turns with mechanical precision, focusing its alien attention on something moving in the canopy above. There are shadow among shadows, a flutter of movement between the diamond-scaled trunks of the club moss giants. Another flyer, perhaps, or something climbing with desperate purpose through the aerial highways of the forest. With a sound like tearing silk, the dragonfly launches itself forward, its massive wings beating with the slow, deliberate rhythm of a funeral drum. It accelerates through the thick air like a bronze arrow shot from the bow of a god, its body cutting through the golden mist with predatory grace. The hunt unfolds in slow motion, each wing beat deliberate and precise, each course correction calculated with the cold intelligence of a perfect killing machine. The prey, a primitive flying thing, part insect, part ancestral memory, flees through the canopy with desperate wing beats, leaving ripples in the heavy air like a stone thrown into still water. But there is no escape in this thick atmosphere, no refuge in speed, when every breath brings fire and power to the pursuer. The dragonfly follows with infinite patience, its bronze body gliding between the ferns and club moss fronds, like death given form and purpose. Its wings catch the light and throw it back in fragments, painting the mist with rainbow shards of refracted gold. The end comes quietly, as endings often do. The prey's desperate flight falters in the rich air, its smaller respiratory system overwhelmed by the very abundance that empowers its hunter. It tumbles through the golden shafts of light like a broken prayer, its wings folded, its brief rebellion against gravity ended. The dragonfly catches it in mid-fall, its mandibles closing with the gentle precision of a priest performing last rites. There is no struggle, no desperate thrashing, only the quiet consumption of one perfect predator by another, the endless cycle of breathing and being breathed that defines this oxygen-drunk world. But the dragonfly is not alone in its aerial kingdom. In the deeper shadows of the canopy, other lords of air hold their ancient courts. Mayflies the size of sparrows dance their brief dances in the amber light, their gossamer wings catching fire from the hidden sun above. They live for hours or days in this rich air, their ephemeral lives burning bright and brief as candle flames in the oxygen-heavy atmosphere. Giant cockroaches scuttle along the bark highways of the Titans, their wings spread like leather cloaks, their antennae testing the thick air for the scent of decay and opportunity. They are the clean-up crew of this abundant world, the recyclers of dreams, turning death back into life with the patient efficiency of nature's undertakers. And in the spaces between, in the gaps where even the thick air grows thin, smaller dragons dance their territorial battles. Insects whose names died with their world, whose forms exist now only in fossil whispers and the dreams of stones. They fight and feed and breed in the rich air, their bodies growing larger with each generation, swollen on the liquid fire of pure oxygen, until they become legends in their own time. The air itself has become a medium for miracles, a substance so dense with possibility that it grants wings to the earthbound and size to the small. Every breath is a gift, every exhalation a prayer, every wing beat a hymn to the abundance that makes all things possible. But abundance, like fire, is a dangerous servant and a cruel master. In the distance, barely visible through the golden mist, tendrils of smoke rise from the forest floor, not the gentle mist of photosynthesis and decay, but something sharper, hungrier, more immediate. The scent of actual burning drifts through the heavy air, mixing with the sweet perfume of oxygen and growth, to create something that tastes of endings and beginnings braided together like smoke and flame. The dragonfly finishes its meal and rises again into the thick air, its bronze body cutting through the golden cathedral spaces with renewed purpose. Around it, the other lords of air continue their ancient dances, their lives burning bright and brief in the oxygen-heavy atmosphere. But the air grows thicker still, and in that thickness, something patient stirs, something that feeds on abundance itself, that grows stronger with every breath the green world takes. The lords of air rule their domain with perfect predatory grace, but even gods must someday face their own creation, their own excess, their own fire made manifest. The cathedral breathes, and its breathing tastes of smoke. The first spark comes from the sky, a finger of lightning reaching down through the heavy air to touch the crown of a club moss giant. For a moment, the tree glows like a green lantern against the grossed, amber mist, its diamond-scaled bark outlined in electric fire, its crown of needle leaves blazing with borrowed starlight. Then the oxygen takes hold. In thinner air, the lightning would flicker and die, a brief greeting between sky and earth that leaves nothing but the scent of ozone and the echo of thunder. But here, in this atmosphere thick as honey and rich as wine, the spark finds fuel beyond imagining. The very air itself becomes an accomplice to combustion, 35% pure fire waiting for an invitation to dance. The club moss crown erupts into flame like a torch soaked in oil. The fire runs down the trunk in rivers of gold and orange, following the channels carved in the diamond bark by eons of growth and storm. It spreads to the neighboring giants with hungry fingers, leaping from crown to crown through the thick air as easily as a man might step from stone to stone across a stream. You can taste the burning in the air now, not just the sweet richness of oxygen and growth, but something sharper, more immediate. The flavor of transformation, of potential becoming kinetic, of the world's own breath, turned against itself, in an orgy of consumption and light. The fire spreads with a patience that is more terrifying than haste. It does not race through the forest as fire does in your thin-aired world, crackling and consuming with desperate hunger. Instead, it flows like liquid light, like molten gold poured through the green cathedral spaces, taking its time to savor each leaf, each frond, each moss-covered branch. In the rich air, everything burns. The ferns that have never known flame in their evolutionary history curl and blacken like dying prayers. The horsetails that grew to giants in this oxygen-drunk world become torches 40 feet tall, their segmented stems burning like massive candles, their smoke rising in perfect vertical columns through the still, heavy air. The centipedes flee before the advancing light, their obsidian bodies flowing through the undergrowth like oil, seeking lower ground. But there is no lower ground in this flat world of swamps and gentle rises, no high places that fire cannot reach when the very air feeds its hunger. They burrow into the soft earth, these titans of the undergrowth, seeking refuge in the breathing soil itself. Above, the lords of air dance, a desperate ballet of survival. The dragonflies bank and wheel through columns of smoke, their bronze bodies flashing like coins thrown into a wishing well. Their compound eyes, evolved to see in spectrums beyond human comprehension, now show them a world transformed into a geometry of heat and light and dancing death. Some escape into the cooler air above the canopy, where the oxygen is slightly thinner and the fire has not yet learned to climb. But others, caught in downdrafts of superheated air, fold their great wings and fall, like shooting stars into the golden inferno below. Their bodies burn like copper incense, their lives ending in brief, beautiful pyres that add their own light to the growing conflagration. The mayflies, ephemeral even in abundance, become living sparks that flicker and die in moments measured in heartbeats. Their gossamer wings ignite, like tissue paper, held to candle flame, their brief dance through the thick air, ending in transformation, from matter to energy, from being to light. But the fire is not malevolent, not in the way human fires are malevolent. It is simply hungry, and in this oxygen-rich world, its hunger is fed by the very abundance that created the green cathedral now burning around you. Every breath the forest took to grow itself has made this moment inevitable. Every exhalation of pure oxygen has been an offering to the flame that was always waiting, always patient, always ready to accept the gift. The smoke rises through the heavy air in perfect columns, hundreds of them, thousands, creating a forest of grey and white pillars that reach toward the hidden Sunday. The smell is not the pungent, acrid bite of modern burning, but something richer, more complex, the distilled essence of 300 million years of growth and decay and photosynthesis, all transformed in moments into heat and light, and the eternal dance of atoms changing partners. You can feel the heat now, pressing against your skin like the breath of a sleeping dragon. The air itself seems to glow with internal light, the oxygen and nitrogen and water vapor becoming a medium for the fire's expression, a canvas on which combustion paints its ancient art. In clearings where the fire has passed, the earth steams with heat and moisture, the soil itself breathing out the accumulated dreams of roots and fungal networks, and all the small, patient things that lived in darkness between the giants. The diamond-scaled bark of the club moss tightens cracks and pops like castanets, releasing stored moisture in small explosions of steam and spark. This is the heartbeat of the world made visible, the rhythm of creation and destruction that underlies all abundance. In the rich air, fire does not destroy, it transforms, it recycles. It returns the concentrated sunlight stored in wood and leaf back to its original form, energy dancing free through the thick atmosphere, like joy made manifest. But even transformation has consequences. The fire feeds on the very oxygen that made the giants possible, consuming the breath of gods to fuel its own luminous hunger. With every tree that burns, with every fern that becomes flame, the air grows slightly thinner, slightly less abundant, slightly more like the world you know. The smoke spreads through the heavy atmosphere like ink through water, dimming the amber light, adding grey shadows to the golden cathedral spaces. Some trees, their moisture content too high even for this patient fire, stand like islands in the sea of flame, their trunks blackened but unbroken, their crowns wreathed in smoke but still green. And in the distance, beyond the immediate circle of transformation, the unburned forest continues its ancient breathing, each leaf still exhaling oxygen into the thick air, still feeding the atmosphere that feeds the fire that will someday come for them as well. The fire is the world's heartbeat made visible, the price of abundance paid in light and heat and the endless recycling of dreams. It is not evil. This fire, it is simply inevitable, the natural consequence of a world that learned to breathe too deeply, to exhale too richly, to dream too large for its own good. The rainforest burns, and in its burning, the air itself begins to change. The fire has passed, leaving behind a landscape transformed. Where once the green cathedral stood in its oxygen-drunk magnificence, now blackened spires reach toward a sky the color of old brass, their diamond-scaled bark scarred by flame, but still breathing, still exhaling the rich gases that make this world possible. Steam rises from the cooling earth in ghostly spirals, carrying with it the concentrated essence of 300 million years of growth and decay. The air tastes different now, still thick, still rich, but with an undertone of ash and transformation, of possibilities consumed and energies released. Every breath carries the memory of flame, the whisper of wood become light, the echo of abundance paying its price in fire and smoke. You stand in a clearing where giants once grew, their absence more profound than presence ever was. The soil beneath your feet is black glass, fused by heat into a surface that reflects the amber light like a dark mirror. In this obsidian ground, new patterns emerge, circles within circles, spirals within spirals. The mathematical poetry that fire writes when it transforms matter into energy and energy into art. The survivors emerge slowly from their refuges. A centipede longer than a fallen log uncoils from beneath a charred fern, its obsidian segments reflecting the one light like black mirrors. It moves, with careful precision, through the transformed landscape, testing each step, each breath, each moment of existence in this world, where fire has written its signature across the green dreams of abundance. Above, a dragonfly circles on wings that shimmer like bronze hammered thin by master craftsmen. Its compound eyes take in the new geometry of this burned world, cataloguing shadows that fall differently now, registering heat signatures that speak of transformation rather than growth. It lands briefly on the blackened trunk of a club moss giant, its delicate legs finding purchase on bark, transformed by flame into something harder, stranger, more enduring than the soft green wood it once was. The air itself feels different against your skin, denser somehow, heavier with possibilities both fulfilled and lost. Each breath brings not just oxygen and moisture, but the weight of consequence. The pressure of abundance become dangerous to itself. The atmosphere has grown so thick that it presses down like a gentle hand, like the touch of a god grown weary with its own creation. In this heavy air, every sound travels differently. The whisper of wings becomes a symphony. The scrape of chitin on bark becomes percussion. The soft exhalation of surviving plants becomes a choir of resurrection and renewal. The very atmosphere has become a medium for music, a substance so dense with possibility that it transforms every vibration into art. But there is something else in the air now, something that was not there before the fire came and went. A tension, perhaps, or a subtle change in pressure, as if the world itself is holding its breath. The oxygen content remains high. 35% pure fire still flows through every cubic inch of atmosphere. But it feels different now. charged with potential energy. Heavy, with the weight of its own abundance. A sound drifts through the thick air, the crack of cooling wood, the whisper of ash settling, the soft pop of steam escaping from heated soil. But, beneath these immediate sounds of transformation, lies something deeper, more fundamental. A rhythm, perhaps, or a pattern of pressure changes, as if the earth itself is breathing differently now, more carefully, with the measured cadence of something that has learned the danger of its own exhalations. The dragonfly takes flight again, its wings beating through air thick as syrup, rich as wine, heavy as the dreams of sleeping gods. It banks toward a stand of survivors, club moss giants, whose moisture-rich trunks protected them from the fire's patient hunger. Their crowns still gleam green against the brass-colored sky, still exhale the precious gases that make this world of abundance possible. But even these survivors show the marks of change. Their leaves curl slightly at the edges, their bark shows stress fractures from the heat, their very breathing seems more labored, more deliberate. They continue their ancient work of transforming sunlight into sugar, carbon dioxide into oxygen, but with a hesitancy that was not there before, as if they too can feel the weight of the air growing heavier with each exhalation. You can taste it now, this weight of consequence. Every breath brings fire and water, sweetness and ash, the concentrated essence of a world learning that abundance itself can become a burden too heavy to bear. The oxygen flows into your lungs like liquid gold, but that gold carries with it the memory of flame, the knowledge of what happens when too much of a good thing becomes its own enemy. In the distance, where the fire has not yet reached, the unburned forest continues its ancient rhythms. Trees breathe out their precious gases, ferns exhale their sweet offerings. The endless green machinery of photosynthesis continues its work of making the air richer, thicker, more abundant with each passing moment. But even there, in the untouched cathedral spaces, something has changed. The very quality of the light seems different, more golden, more dense, as if the atmosphere itself has become a lens that focuses the sun's energy into something more concentrated, more dangerous. The weight of air presses down on everything now, on the surviving giants with their stress-fractured bark, on the emerging insects with their confusion and displacement, on the very soil itself as it cools and contracts and learns to bear the burden of transformation. This is abundance approaching its own limits, richness becoming heaviness, the breath of gods growing too thick for mortal lungs. A whisper moves through the heavy atmosphere, carried on currents too subtle for eyes to see but too powerful for hearts to ignore. It speaks of change coming, of balances shifting, of abundance preparing to pay its final price. The air grows thicker still with each moment, each breath, each exhalation from the green world that does not yet understand what it has created. The lords of air continue their ancient dances, but with less grace now, more effort. Even their perfect predatory machinery struggles against the increasing density of the atmosphere they rule. Their wings beat slower, their flights grow shorter, their hunts require more energy for less reward. This is the weight of air becoming too heavy for its own good, the pressure of abundance grown dangerous to itself. The world breathes deeper, richer, more desperately with each moment. But that breathing is bringing it closer to something unthinkable, a moment when even gods must learn to choke on their own success. The air tastes sweet still, but with an undertone of warning. The brass sky presses down like the lid of a vast container, sealing in the thick atmosphere that has become both gift and curse, both blessing and burden. And in the distance, barely audible above the heavy breathing of the transformed world, comes the sound of something vast and patient stirring. Something that feeds on abundance itself, that grows stronger with every breath the green world takes, that waits with infinite patience for the moment when even the gods of air will learn the weight of their own excess. But every god that breathes must someday choke. The moment approaches like a held breath, like the pause before the storm, like the silence before the screaming begins. Close your eyes and breathe backward through time. Feel the weight of ages settling on your chest, like layers of forgotten dreams. The air grows thin, then thick. then thin again as you drift through the corridors of deep time, past the burning forests and bronze-winged dragons, past the weight of abundance and the price of fire, deeper still into the ancient silence where the first crime was committed against the sky. 2.5 billion years before the giants walked, before the lords of air ruled their green cathedral, before fire learned to dance in oxygen-drunk atmosphere, the earth wore different clothes. No continents as you know them, only scattered islands of black rock rising from purple seas that stretched to every horizon. No forests, no ferns, no breathing spires, of green reaching toward a sun that burned younger and angrier, in a sky the color of rust and shadow. The air itself was different, then thin, metallic, hungry. No oxygen to speak of, only the exhalations of volcanoes and the breath of stones, carbon dioxide and methane and hydrogen sulfide, painting the atmosphere in shades of poison and possibility. This was a world that breathed through different lungs, dreamed different dreams, knew different gods than the oxygen-drunk titans of later ages. But in the purple seas, something stirred. Something small, patient, revolutionary. The cyanobacteria blue-green algae, no larger than dust motes, simple as prayers, innocent as the first word ever spoken. They floated in their billions through the ancient waters, learning the alchemy that would change everything, how to steal light from the angry young sun and transform it into food, how to breathe carbon dioxide and exhale something new, something unprecedented, something that would poison the world with its own abundance. Oxygen, the first great toxin, the original sin against the ancient atmosphere. Watch them now, these microscopic architects of catastrophe, as they spread through the purple seas like living ink through water. Each cell no more than a whisper of organized matter, each breath an exhalation of revolution. They cluster in mats and films on the seafloor, painting the ancient depths in gardens of blue-green that pulse with their own internal light. They are beautiful in their simplicity, these first poisoners. No complex thoughts trouble their cellular dreams, no awareness of consequence burdens their ancient metabolism. They simply do what they were born to do: steal sunlight, breathe poison, multiply in the endless fertility of innocence, unaware of its own destructive power. The oceans begin to change. The purple waters, heavy with iron and silence, start to taste different. A new flavor creeps through the ancient seas, metallic, sharp, dangerous. The oxygen that bubbles up from the blue-green mats does not dissipate harmlessly into the methane sky. Instead, it begins its patient work of transformation, molecule by molecule, breath by breath, building towards something unprecedented in the history of the world. You can taste it in the water now, this new poison. It burns the primitive throats of the ancient bacteria that have ruled these seas for billions of years. The methanogens, the sulfur eaters, the simple archaeans that learned to live in the harsh chemistry of the early Earth, they begin to die. Not quickly, not dramatically, but with the slow inevitability of flowers wilting in toxic air. This is death by abundance, murder by gift. The oxygen that the cyanobacteria exhale in their innocent metabolic joy is pure poison to everything that came before. It steals electrons, disrupts ancient chemistries, burns through cellular membranes like acid through silk. The old rulers of the purple seas begin their long, slow funeral march toward extinction. But the cyanobacteria do not notice. They continue their work with the mindless efficiency of successful revolutionaries, their blue-green colonies spreading across the seafloor like liberation armies that do not know they are committing genocide. Every moment of photosynthesis is an act of war against the ancient world. Every exhalation of oxygen a bullet fired into the heart of 3 billion years of evolution. The seas begin to foam, not with life, but with the chemistry of death and transformation. The oxygen finds the iron dissolved in the purple waters, iron that has floated free in the ancient seas since the world was young, and begins its work of binding, of rusting, of pulling the metal out of solution in clouds of red-brown precipitation. Banded iron formations begin to stripe the seafloor like the rings of a vast tree, each layer recording another pulse of oxygen, another breath of poison exhaled by the blue-green revolutionaries. The chemistry of the world itself begins to change, element by element, reaction by reaction, as the ancient reducing atmosphere starts its slow transformation into something oxidizing, something dangerous, something that will burn. And still the cyanobacteria multiply, their populations exploding in the rich sunlight that pours down through the transparent seas. They have discovered the ultimate renewable energy source, the conversion of light into life that will power every green thing that follows. But with that discovery comes responsibility they cannot comprehend, consequences they cannot imagine, a debt that will be paid by everything that breathes the air they are slowly, inevitably poisoning. The first great mass extinction begins not with fire or ice or asteroid impact, but with the patient work of microbes learning to breathe light and exhale death. It unfolds over millions of years, slow as geology, inevitable as gravity, silent as the space between stars. The purple seas grow paler as their ancient chemistry dies. The rust-colored sky begins its long transformation towards something bluer, cleaner, more dangerous. And in the depths, the blue-green mats continue their unconscious work of revolution, their simple cells dividing and redividing, their primitive metabolisms churning out the poison that will remake the world. This is the hidden cost of abundance, made manifest the knowledge that every gift carries within it the seeds of its own destruction, that every breath given freely becomes, in time, a breath that suffocates. The cyanobacteria have learned to transform sunlight into food, but in doing so, they have transformed their world into something alien, something hostile to its own past. The ancient atmosphere begins to die, molecule by molecule, as the new poison spreads through air and water alike. The old gods of methane and hydrogen sulfide retreat to the deepest places, the most hidden refuges, while their domain is slowly conquered by the blue-green armies of photosynthesis. And in the growing concentration of oxygen in air and sea, something patient stirs. Something that feeds on abundance itself, that grows stronger with every breath the revolutionaries take, that waits with infinite patience for the moment, when even the poisoners will learn to choke on their own success. The sky begins its long transformation toward blue, and everything beneath it prepares to die. The dying begins in silence, as dying often does. In the purple depths where no light penetrates, where the ancient bacteria have made their homes for 3 billion years, the first casualties of abundance fall like autumn leaves in a world that has never known seasons. They are beautiful, these ancient ones, in their alien simplicity. Methanogens that breathe the chemistry of deep space, their cellular dreams filled with memories of the world's violent birth. Sulfur eaters that find sweetness in what would poison any complex life, their metabolisms tuned to frequencies older than continents. Iron breathers that taste metal like honey, their existence a whispered conversation between biology and geology that predates every familiar thing. But now the conversation grows stilted, strained, poisoned by the new chemistry bubbling up from the blue-green mats above. The oxygen seeps downward through the water column like liquid fire, seeking out the ancient refuges where the old gods have hidden from change since the world was young. It touches their cellular membranes with fingers of flame, disrupts their ancient chemistries with the casual violence of abundance, unaware of its own power. Watch one now as it dies a methanogen no larger than a grain of dust, its lifespan measured in moments, but its lineage stretching back to the very dawn of biology. Its cell membrane begins to blister where the oxygen touches it, the ancient lipids breaking down under assault from the reactive poison that the blue-green revolutionaries exhale with every breath. The methanogen's metabolism stutters, falters, stops. The ancient chemical pathways that have carried energy through its primitive body for 3 billion years suddenly find themselves blocked by the presence of something that steals electrons, that burns through the familiar chemistry of reduction and replacement with the bright fire of oxidation. It tries to repair itself, to adapt, to find some accommodation with this new poison in its world. But adaptation takes time, and the oxygen gives no quarter, shows no mercy. It dies as it lived in silence, in darkness, in the purple depths where no witness marks its passing. But it is not alone. Around it, throughout the ancient seas, its countless relatives join the first great funeral procession in the history of life. Billions upon billions of microscopic mourners, each one a thread in the vast tapestry of primitive existence, that the oxygen revolution is slowly, methodically, unraveling. Above them, the chemistry of the world itself begins to change in ways that will echo through geological time. The iron that has floated free in the purple seas since the Earth was young finds itself suddenly courted by the ascending oxygen, their chemical romance written in bands of rust that settle toward the seafloor like red snow falling upward through liquid space. The banded iron formations grow thicker with each passing eon, each stripe a record of another pulse of oxygen poisoning, another exhalation from the blue-green mats that carpet the shallows in their unconscious abundance. Red jasper alternates with black hematite, recording the rhythm of death and oxidation in stone that will outlast the memory of what it chronicles. You can see it happening if you know how to look the slow transition from a reducing world to an oxidizing one, from purple seas, heavy with dissolved metals, to clearer waters, where iron rusts and settles and leaves behind something unprecedented in Earth's history: transparency. The ancient opacity of metal-rich water gives way to clarity that will someday allow light to penetrate depths that have known only darkness since the world began. But transparency comes at a price. Each clear molecule of water represents countless ancient bacteria whose chemical partnerships with dissolved metals have been severed by the ascending oxygen. Each moment of new clarity is purchased with the death of lineages, older than continents, metabolisms more ancient than the very concept of death itself. The seafloor grows heavy with the corpses of chemistry. Banded iron formations pile upon banded iron formations, creating mountains of rust and silence that entomb the evidence of the first great mass extinction. The purple seas grow paler as their iron bleeds out in red clouds, as their ancient chemistry dies one reaction at a time. And still the cyanobacteria multiply in the shallows, their blue-green colonies, spreading like liberation armies that do not know they are committing genocide. They have stumbled upon the ultimate energy source, direct conversion of sunlight into life, and in their success, they doom everything that cannot learn their new chemistry, everything that cannot adapt to breathing poison. The sky itself begins to change. For 3 billion years, it has worn the colors of metal and methane, rust and shadow, purple and gray, the muted palette of a world where oxygen was rarer than gold. But now, molecule by molecule, breath by poisonous breath, it begins its slow transformation towards something unprecedented: blue. The first faint hint of azure appears at the zenith on cloudless days, a color so alien that no living thing has eyes evolved to see it properly. It is the color of oxygen bonding with nitrogen, of atmosphere learning to burn, of air becoming dangerous to everything that has ever drawn breath in the ancient reducing chemistry of the early world. This is beauty born from catastrophe, majesty purchased with genocide. The terrible aesthetics of abundance become poisonous to its own foundation. The blue sky that will someday inspire poets and lovers and dreamers emerges from the corpses of the ancient world, its beauty inseparable from its violence, its glory founded on the quiet graves of 3 billion years of bacterial civilization. In the depths, the last refuges of the old chemistry huddle in the darkness, where oxygen cannot easily penetrate. Hot springs and deep-sea vents become arcs for the ancient metabolisms, final sanctuaries where methanogens and sulfur eaters and iron breathers continue their whispered conversations with the Earth's metallic heart. They survive, these refugees from abundance, but their empire is ended. Their 3 billion-year dominion broken by the patient revolution of blue-green light stealers. The purple seas grow clearer, paler, more transparent with each passing million years. Iron rusts and settles, carrying with it the chemical memory of an older world, leaving behind waters that will someday reflect a blue sky and green forests and bronze-winged dragons drunk on oxygen abundance. But that abundance is still building, still poisoning, still killing with the methodical efficiency of successful revolution. The oxygen content of the atmosphere climbs slowly but inexorably. Each molecule, another nail in the coffin of the ancient world. Each breath, another step toward the oxygen-drunk future where giants will walk and fire will dance, and the very air will become too thick for its own good. The first mass funeral continues in silence, its mourners too small to see, its grief too vast to comprehend, its consequences still unfolding, 3 billion years later, in the weight of air that presses down on surviving worlds. The sky turns blue for the first time, and everything beneath it dies. Rise now, from the purple depths of ancient catastrophe, float forward through the corridors of deep time, past the silent funeral of the first world, past the slow birth of blue skies, and the patient accumulation of poison in the air. Feel the weight of eons settling on your shoulders like snow that never melts, carrying you forward through geological ages to a world drunk on its own success, dizzy with abundance, terrifyingly beautiful in its excess. The carboniferous world spreads below you like a green dream made manifest, but seen from above, from the perspective of sky and cloud and the domain of wings, it reveals patterns invisible to earthbound eyes. The forests stretch to every horizon, not the scattered groves and clearings of thinner-aired times, but an unbroken carpet of green that breathes out oxygen like incense in a cathedral the size of continents. From this aerial perspective, you can see the true scale of abundance. Club moss forests cover landmasses with the geometric precision of nature drunk on possibility. Horsetail groves arrange themselves in spirals that follow mathematical rules too complex for conscious design, their segmented trunks catching the amber light in patterns that hurt to contemplate directly. And moving through this aerial kingdom, the monsters of the air hold court in skies thick enough to swim through, rich enough to burn, heavy enough to support things that have no right to fly. Watch the approach of a giant dragonfly, but truly giant now, seen in proper proportion to the vastness of its domain. 6 feet of wingspan cutting through air dense as water, its bronze body gleaming like a sword forged by gods who have forgotten the meaning of restraint. Its compound eyes, each one larger than your fist, process visual information in spectrums that include ultraviolet fire patterns and infrared heat signatures, painting the thick air in colors that have no names. This is Meganeura, the ultimate expression of what happens when arthropods discover unlimited oxygen. Its respiratory system, that network of tubes and chambers that delivers air directly to every cell, has been optimized by 300 million years of breathing fire. In atmosphere 35% oxygen, it needs no heart to circulate its blood, no complex lungs to process its breath. The abundance flows into it directly, intimately, like a lover's whisper made of pure energy. But abundance breeds monsters, and monsters breed hunger on a scale to match their size. The dragonfly's hunting ground encompasses square miles of airspace, its territorial claims written in pheromone markers that hang in the thick air like invisible fences. It patrols these boundaries with the methodical precision of a predator that has evolved beyond all constraint, all limitation, all natural law except the physics of flight through liquid atmosphere. Below, other monsters move through their own kingdoms of excess. A centipede, as long as a school bus, flows between the diamond-scaled trunks of club moss giants, its obsidian segments rippling with hydraulic precision. Its respiratory system has grown, so efficient in the rich air that each breath brings fire to muscles capable of crushing stone, toxins refined to deadly perfection, reflexes honed to supernatural quickness. But these monsters are prisoners of their own perfection, slaves to the abundance that created them. The centipede's massive body requires constant feeding to fuel its oversized metabolism, its hunting ground measured in miles rather than feet. It must kill daily to survive, and in doing so, it shapes the ecosystem around it into a landscape of fear and silence, where smaller creatures huddle in hiding, and the very forest holds its breath. The dragonfly banks through a column of warm air rising from the sun-heated forest below, its wings adjusting to microcurrents with computer-like precision. But even this perfect flying machine struggles against the increasing density of the atmosphere it rules. The air that feeds its fire also weighs it down, requiring ever more energy to achieve the same grace, the same speed, the same predatory excellence. In the canopy below, other aerial monsters conduct their own ballets of excess. Mayflies, the size of ravens, dance their breeding displays in clouds that block out the sun, their gossamer wings creating thunder as they beat against air thick enough to lean on. But their adult lives burn bright and brief hours, instead of days, in this supercharged atmosphere, their oversized bodies, consuming themselves in metabolic fires, too hot to sustain. Giant cockroaches scuttle through the aerial highways of the Green Cathedral, their wings spread like leather sails, their bodies armored against the casual violence of a world where everything is predator, everything is prey, Everything is locked in an evolutionary arms race with no finish line and no rules, except grow larger, hunt better, consume more. From your aerial vantage point, you can see the tragic mathematics of it all. Each generation of monsters produces offspring slightly larger than themselves, better adapted to breathing fire, more efficient at extracting energy from the thick air. But each increase in size requires more territory, more food, more oxygen to fuel the growing metabolic fires. The monsters are optimizing themselves toward a cliff edge they cannot see, pursuing perfection in an environment that rewards excess until excess becomes its own punishment. The forests below breathe out their poisonous abundance with mechanical regularity, each tree a factory for producing the very atmosphere that makes monsters possible. But the system is accelerating beyond any sustainable equilibrium, feeding back on itself in loops of cause and effect that spiral towards something unprecedented in the history of life. You can feel it in the air itself, the pressure building, the atmosphere growing heavy with its own success. The oxygen content continues to climb with each passing millennium, making fire more likely, metabolism more efficient, monsters more monstrous. But there are limits to everything, even abundance, and those limits approach, like storm clouds, on a horizon, still too distant to see clearly. The dragonfly completes its patrol and settles on the crown of a club moss giant, its bronze body steaming slightly in the thick air. Around it, the aerial kingdom pulses, with life too large, too fast, too hungry for any world, except this one, this brief moment in geological time when the atmosphere learned to breathe poison and call it paradise. But paradise, like poison, is a temporary state. The monsters rule their aerial domain with perfect predatory grace, but they are evolution's gamblers, betting everything on abundance, continuing forever, staking their massive bodies and oversized appetites on an atmospheric loan that nature will someday call due. The air grows thicker still, and in that thickness, something patient stirs, something that feeds on abundance itself, that grows stronger with every breath the green world takes, that waits, with infinite patience, for the moment when even monsters must learn the price of their own perfection. The sky belongs to giants, but giants have the farthest to fall. The first sign comes not with fire or flood, but with silence. In the deep places of the world, where tectonic plates grind against each other like the teeth of sleeping gods, something shifts. The volcanic activity that has painted the sky with greenhouse gases for millions of years begins to slow, to stutter, to fade like a candle burning down to its wick. The change creeps through the green empire with the patience of geological time, invisible at first to the monsters that rule the thick air, and the giants that breathe out abundance with every photosynthetic exhalation. But you can taste it if you know how a subtle thinning in the atmosphere, a barely perceptible reduction in the weight of air, that has pressed down on this world like the breath of gods for so long that nothing alive remembers breathing anything else. The club moss giants feel it first, their diamond-scaled trunks beginning to show stress fractures as the atmospheric pressure that supported their impossible height starts to diminish. These trees that grew drunk on abundance, that stretched toward a brass sky, confident in their ability to breathe fire forever, find themselves struggling with architectural problems they have never faced before. Their leaves, evolved for maximum surface area in thick air rich with carbon dioxide, begin to curl at the edges as the atmospheric mix slowly shifts. The chemical gradient that drove their photosynthetic engines with such efficiency starts to flatten, making each breath of carbon dioxide harder to extract, each exhalation of oxygen more costly to produce. But the trees cannot adapt quickly enough. Evolution works on scales of millions of years, while climate change measures its work in thousands. The giants that took eons to perfect their breathing begin to suffocate in air that grows thinner with each passing season. Each year, each decade of gradual atmospheric transformation. In the aerial kingdom above the dying forests, the monsters of the air begin their own slow dance with extinction. The great dragonfly that once ruled 6-mile territories finds its hunting ground shrinking as the thick air that made its massive wingspan possible starts to thin. Its bronze body, evolved for swimming through atmosphere dense as water, begins to struggle with the physics of flight in air that can no longer support its impossible weight. Watch it now as it attempts a hunting dive that would have been effortless in the richer air of its youth. Its wings beat with desperate frequency, fighting against atmosphere that no longer yields to its ancient authority. The dive becomes a labored glide. The glide becomes a struggle. The struggle becomes a slow fall toward Earth that rushes up to meet it with the inexorable patience of gravity, finally claiming its due. The dragonfly lands hard on the crown of a dying club moss giant, its impact shaking leaves that rustle with the dry whisper of dehydration. Its compound eyes evolved to process visual information in an atmosphere that scattered light, like liquid prisms, now strained to function in air growing clearer, thinner, less forgiving with each breath. Below, in the understory of the dying green cathedral, the centipede that once flowed between the giants like living midnight finds its own perfection becoming a curse. Its massive body, optimized for extracting oxygen from rich air, begins to labor as the atmospheric content slowly drops from 35% to 34% to 33%, to levels that make its oversized metabolism an increasingly expensive burden to maintain. The centipede's hunting patterns change from the flowing grace of absolute predator to the careful conservation of a creature learning the meaning of scarcity. It must rest between hunts now, must choose its prey more carefully, must husband energy that once flowed through its obsidian segments like electricity through copper wire. The forests themselves begin to thin as the club moss giants start their long dying. Not the quick death of fire or disease, but the slow strangulation of organisms built for abundance learning to breathe scarcity. Their crowns lose their green luster first, the needle leaves turning yellow, then brown, then falling like prayers that will never be answered. The diamond-scaled bark begins to crack as internal pressures change, as the trees that once breathed out oxygen with the confidence of gods find themselves struggling to maintain the basic chemistry of life. The geometric patterns in their bark, those mathematical spirals that caught light and threw it back in prismatic rainbows, begin to fade as stress fractures spread through their structure like age lines on the face of a dying civilization. Whole groves fall in synchronized collapse, their root systems too specialized for rich soil and abundant air to adapt to the changing chemistry of their world. The sound of their falling echoes through the thinning atmosphere like the funeral bells of an empire that ruled the world for 50 million years and never imagined it could end. The mayflies that once danced in clouds large enough to block the sun find their populations crashing as the thick air that supported their impossible aerial ballets grows too thin for their gossamer wings to find purchase. Their breeding swarms become smaller, more desperate, their brief adult lives burning out even faster in atmosphere that can no longer sustain their metabolic fires. Giant cockroaches fold their leather wings and return to ground-based existence as the aerial highways of the forest canopy become too demanding for their oversized bodies to navigate. The three-dimensional ecosystem of the rich air begins to collapse into something flatter, more terrestrial, more like the thin-aired world that will someday replace this dying empire of abundance. The smell of decay begins to season the thinning air, not the rich, fertile decay of abundance, recycling itself, but the bitter scent of systems failing, of ecological machinery breaking down faster than it can repair itself. The oxygen content of the atmosphere, fed for so long by the endless exhalations of the green empire, begins to plateau and then slowly decline as more trees die than grow, more giants fall than rise. Fire becomes rarer in the cooling air. The lightning strikes that once guaranteed conflagration, now flickering out in atmosphere, too thin to sustain combustion. The patient flames that once flowed through the forest like liquid light find themselves starved of the oxygen that made them possible, guttering out like candles in a room where all the air is slowly bleeding away. But the dying takes time, geological time, evolutionary time, the kind of time that turns mountains into sand and species into fossils. The green empire does not fall in a day or a year or even a millennium. It fades like a song played at the edge of hearing, like a dream that grows fainter with each moment of waking, like the last breath of a god who is finally learning how to die. The thick air that made monsters possible grows thinner, and the monsters begin their own long journey toward the fossil record, toward the museums of stone, where future ages will puzzle over their impossible bones and wonder what kind of world could have produced such beautiful impossibilities. The Green Empire breathes its last, and the age of abundance prepares to give way to something smaller, more careful, more sustainable, and infinitely more fragile. Silence spreads across the world like snow that never melts, settling into the spaces where the breathing of giants once filled the air with liquid gold. The last club moss cathedral stands empty now, its diamond-scaled pillars cracked and hollow, its crown lost to the thinning sky that no longer remembers how to hold the weight of dreams made manifest. The air itself has forgotten how to burn, where once every lightning strike birthed fires that danced for months through oxygen-drunk forests. Now even direct flame struggles to find purchase in atmosphere too thin to sustain combustion. The sky has learned to swallow light instead of reflecting it, painting the world in shades of grey and silence that speak of exhaustion beyond recovery. You can feel the cold creeping in, not the dramatic ice of sudden climate catastrophe, but the slow chill of a world gradually bleeding warmth into space as the greenhouse gases that once trapped heat in thick layers of abundance begin to thin and scatter. The volcanic activity that fed the atmospheric fires for millions of years has slowed to sporadic whispers, leaving the sky hungry for the carbon dioxide that once made breathing an act of intoxication. In the spaces between the fallen giants, frost forms patterns that no living eye will see. Ice crystals grow in geometric spirals that echo the diamond scales of the dead trees. Nature, writing its own epitaph in languages of frozen water and abandoned atmosphere. The moisture that once hung in the air like liquid starlight now precipitates out in silver tears that coat the world in the crystalline memory of what abundance looked like when it learned to weep. The last dragonfly clings to the bark of a dying horsetail, its bronze wings folded against the cold that seeps through air too thin to hold warmth. Its compound eyes, those thousand-faceted windows into an alien intelligence, have clouded with the cataracts of atmospheric starvation. It can no longer see the heat signatures and ultraviolet fire patterns that once painted its world in colors beyond human comprehension. Its breathing has slowed to the rhythm of geological time, each inhalation a struggle against air that can no longer feed the metabolic fires that made it a god of the sky. The network of tubes that once delivered liquid oxygen directly to every cell now struggles to extract enough gas from the thinning atmosphere to keep its massive body functional. The dragonfly's death comes quietly, as deaths often do when the world itself is dying. Its grip loosens on the bark, its wings spread one last time in a gesture that might be surrender or prayer, or simply the final release of muscles too starved for oxygen to contract again. It falls through air too thin to catch it, landing among the frost-covered debris of an empire that ruled the world for 50 million years and left behind only silence. Below, in the undergrowth that once writhed with giants, the last centipede moves with the careful precision of something that has learned the meaning of conservation. Each step is calculated, each breath rationed, each movement weighed against the diminishing returns of a metabolism evolved for abundance, trying to function in scarcity. But conservation is not adaptation, and rationing is not evolution. The centipede's obsidian segments begin to lose their lustrous shine as cellular repair systems shut down to preserve energy. Its antennae, once sensitive enough to taste molecules of prey scent in rich air, now wave blindly through atmosphere too thin to carry the chemical signatures it needs to hunt. It finds a crevice between the roots of a fallen giant and curls its massive body into the smallest possible configuration, entering a state that is neither life nor death, but something in between a metabolic hibernation that might last days or decades, or geological ages, waiting for an abundance that will never return. The forests themselves have become graveyards of their own ambition. Fallen trunks lie like the bones of titans, their diamond-scaled bark slowly cracking and weathering under skies that no longer know how to reign properly. The geometric patterns that once caught light and threw it back in prismatic beauty now serve only as channels for ice and wind, carving the corpses of giants into abstract sculptures that speak of beauty dissolved into utility, of art reclaimed by physics. The oxygen content of the atmosphere continues its slow decline as the last photosynthetic engines of the Green Empire sputter and fail. 25%, 20%, 15%. numbers that mark not just the thinning of air, but the breakdown of an entire planetary metabolism, the failure of a biosphere that learned to breathe fire and forgot that fire consumes the very air that feeds it. In the clearer, thinner atmosphere, the sky begins to show colors it has not worn for millions of years. The brass haze of thick air gives way to sharper blues, cleaner grays, the transparent palette of a world learning to see itself clearly for the first time in geological ages. But clarity comes at a price: the loss of mystery, the death of dreams, the end of abundance as a way of life. The few surviving creatures huddle in the deepest places, the most protected refuges, where pockets of thicker air still linger like the last warm spots in a cooling house. They are the inheritors of catastrophe, these survivors smaller, simpler, more conservative in their appetites and more careful in their breathing. But even they can feel the weight of ending pressing down on their world like a vast hand. The atmospheric pressure that once held up giants and made monsters possible continues to drop, leaving behind a planet that feels somehow deflated, somehow smaller, as if the very air has learned to hold its breath and wait for something that may never come. The last fires guttering in the thin air throw shadows that dance with desperate brevity before dying into darkness. The last breath of abundance exhales through the ruins of its empire, leaving behind silence so complete that it seems to have weight, substance, presence of its own. This is the long winter of atmospheric failure, the ice age of the sky itself, when the very air forgot how to support the weight of dreams. The green empire, that once breathed out fire with every exhalation, now lies still and cold under stars that shine with cruel clarity through atmosphere too thin to scatter their light into mercy. The earth inhales one last time a shallow, desperate breath that tastes of frost and failure and the metallic bitterness of dreams deferred, and then holds that breath, waiting in the silence between heartbeats for the next age to begin, the next experiment in the eternal dance between abundance and scarcity, between breathing and suffocating, between the gift of oxygen and the curse of air that learns to burn. The long winter settles over a world that has forgotten how to exhale, and in that held breath, something new and patient begins to stir in the margins, in the refuges, in the quiet spaces where life learns to begin again, in the afterward of catastrophe, when the last echoes of falling giants have faded into the geological silence that follows all great dyings. The world lies still as a held breath. The air tastes thin now, clean in the way that emptiness is clean, transparent in the way that abandonment is transparent. This is the morning after abundance, the quiet that comes when gods learn mortality and empires discover the weight of their own success. Grey light filters through atmosphere that has forgotten how to scatter gold, painting everything in the muted palette of recovery and resignation. The sky wears colors it has not known for 50 million years: pale blue instead of brass, silver instead of amber, the honest hues of air that has learned to admit its own limitations. Where once the green cathedrals breathed out liquid fire, now scattered survivors huddle in the margins of a world that has grown too large for its remaining inhabitants. These are not the titans of the age of abundance. Those diamond-scaled giants lie fossilizing in sediments that will someday become coal, their carbon bodies pressed into black memory by the weight of forgetting time. Instead, the inheritors of catastrophe are smaller things, humbler things, organisms that learned the art of living carefully, while their magnificent neighbors burned bright and brief in oxygen-drunk splendor. They emerge now from the refuges where they waited out the storm of abundance, blinking in light filtered through air too thin to intoxicate. A moss spreads across the weathered bark of a fallen club moss giant, its simple green cells processing the thinned atmosphere with patient efficiency. This is not the explosive photosynthesis of the age of giants, no great exhalations of pure oxygen, no breathing out of liquid fire, but something more modest, more sustainable, more aware of its own limitations. The moss knows, in the cellular wisdom that guides all simple things, that survival lies not in growing as large as possible, but in growing as wisely as possible. Its metabolism runs cooler, its chemistry more conservative, its dreams smaller, but longer lasting than the magnificent nightmares that preceded it. In pools of water that reflect the new grey sky, algae bloom in careful patterns that speak of lessons learned from observing the deaths of giants. These are the descendants of the ancient cyanobacteria that first poisoned the world with oxygen, but they have evolved a different relationship with their own exhalations. They photosynthesize with the restraint of organisms that have inherited the knowledge of what happens when breathing becomes too rich, too fast, too abundant for the world to bear. A primitive arthropod scuttles across the forest floor, its body no longer than your thumb, its movements quick and economical. It is cousin to the centipedes that once flowed like living midnight between the cathedral pillars, but evolution has taught it the mathematics of moderation. Its respiratory system processes the thin air with careful efficiency, extracting enough oxygen to live, but not enough to grow into the magnificent, doomed perfection of its giant ancestors. This arthropod knows its place in a world learning to breathe within its means. It hunts smaller prey, claims smaller territories, dreams smaller dreams. But in that smallness lies a kind of immortality, the promise of sustainability, of existence that can continue not for geological moments, but for geological ages. The atmospheric chemistry itself begins to stabilize around new equilibrium points. Oxygen hovers at levels that allow combustion without guaranteeing conflagration, that permit growth without encouraging gigantism, that enable complexity without demanding excess. The air learns to hold just enough moisture to support life, but not so much that everything drowns in abundance. In this new balance, different kinds of beauty emerge. The geometric precision of frost on fallen logs creates patterns as complex as the diamond scales of the dead giants, but temporary, ephemeral, writing themselves in ice, and melting away to write themselves again. These are aesthetics of impermanence, art that knows its own mortality and finds grace in that knowledge. A small fern unfurls its fronds in a shaft of grey sunlight, each leaflet perfectly formed but scaled to the modest proportions of a world that has learned to live within its atmospheric budget. The fern processes carbon dioxide and exhales oxygen in careful, measured breaths, contributing to the atmosphere's slow recovery without overwhelming it with abundance. Above, in skies too thin for giants, smaller flyers have begun to appear. Insects with wings scaled to the new atmospheric reality, their flight patterns conservative, their energy expenditure calculated, their beauty found not in impossible size, but in precise adaptation to actual conditions rather than idealized abundance. These new flyers patrol territories measured in yards rather than miles, hunt prey their own size rather than seeking dominion over entire ecosystems. They have learned the lesson that the giants never could, that survival belongs, not to the largest or the strongest or the most abundant, but to the most balanced, the most aware of limits, the most capable of living within, rather than beyond the means of their world. The soil itself begins to change as the remains of the age of abundance decompose into something richer and more complex than mere earth. The carbon bodies of the fallen giants, their diamond-scaled bark and needle leaves, break down slowly under the patient work of bacteria and fungi that have learned to process even the debris of catastrophe into the raw materials of renewal. This is not the explosive fertility of the rich air times, when soil itself seemed to breathe out green abundance with every sunrise. Instead, it is the careful, measured productivity of a world that has learned to husband its resources, to invest its energy in sustainability rather than spectacle. Small streams flow clear and cold through the ruins of the Green Empire, their water unburned by the excessive oxygen that once made every drop potentially combustible. Fish begin to return to these waters, not the giants that once swam through air thick as syrup, but appropriately sized creatures adapted to both water and the thinned atmosphere above it. The silence that follows catastrophe is not empty silence, but full silence, pregnant silence, the quiet of a world holding space for something new to be born. In this aftermath of abundance, life learns a different kind of breathing, deeper, but not desperate, fuller, but not frantic, rich, but not toxic, with its own excess. The grey light fades toward evening, and in that fading, something like peace settles over the quiet world. Not the peace of endings, but the peace of new beginnings, of systems finding balance, of a biosphere learning to breathe in harmony with its own limitations, rather than in spite of them. The storm of abundance has passed, leaving behind a world smaller but wiser, quieter but more sustainable, humbler, but perhaps, in that humility, more capable of the kind of beauty that endures, not for geological moments, but for geological ages. In the deep places where coal seams run like black rivers through the earth's sleeping memory, the ghosts of abundance whisper in languages older than words. Their voices rise from compressed forests, from the carbon bodies of giants pressed into darkness by the weight of forgetting time, speaking in frequencies only the silence can hear. Listen, can you hear them? The diamond-scaled cathedrals, singing their slow songs of transformation, their cellular hymns compressed into substance, dense as prayers, black as the space between stars. Each coal seam is a library of lost breathing, each carbon molecule a letter in the autobiography of a world that learned to exhale fire and forgot how to stop. You can feel their presence in the spaces between your heartbeats, in the pause between inhalation and exhalation, in the moment of silence that exists at the center of every breath. They are there, the giants who once breathed out liquid gold, who exhaled abundance until abundance became poison, who died of their own success and left their bodies as fuel for worlds they could never imagine. Touch the black coal with your mind's fingers and feel the texture of their memory. Here, in this compressed darkness, lies the crown of a club moss giant that reached 200 feet toward a brass sky, its needle leaves catching amber light and throwing it back in geometric rainbows. Feel how its cellular dreams have been pressed into carbon lattices that still hold the pattern of photosynthesis. Still remember the ancient alchemy of transforming light into life. The coal burns now in the fires of later worlds, releasing in moments of flame the sunlight that the giants hoarded for millions of years. Each combustion is a resurrection. Each flame, a brief return of the ancient breathing. Each wisp of smoke, a ghost made visible. The spirits of abundance rising one more time into air too thin to sustain their original magnificence. But their whispers carry more than memory. In the limestone layers that sandwich the coal seams, other voices join the chorus of the vanished. Here lie the shells of ancient seas, the calcium carbonate skeletons of creatures that filtered oxygen-rich waters through bodies designed for abundance. Their fossils speak in the click and whisper of shell against shell, telling stories of underwater forests where brachiopods grew like flowers and crinoids swayed like meadow grass in currents thick with dissolved fire. Move deeper into the stone memory, into the shale layers that preserve the most delicate ghosts, the insects caught mid-flight in sediments, fine as flour, their wings spread in eternal moments of pursuit or escape. Here lies a dragonfly frozen in its final dive, its compound eyes clouded with the cataracts of atmospheric starvation, its bronze body still beautiful in death, still speaking of skies thick enough to swim through, air rich enough to intoxicate. The shale holds them all, predator and prey locked in stone tableau that tell the story of abundance's rise and fall. Giant cockroaches with wings spread like leather prayers, centipedes coiled in defensive spirals that preserved their obsidian beauty for 300 million years. Mayflies caught in their brief dances of desperation, as the thick air began to thin around them. Their voices blend in harmonies that only fossils can sing, stone symphonies that resonate through geological time, at frequencies below human hearing, but above human understanding. They sing of the weight of air, of breathing made dangerous by its own richness, of the terrible mathematics of success becoming suicide. In the museum cases of later ages, their reconstructed skeletons will stand as monuments to impossible beauty, their bones speaking silently of worlds too magnificent to sustain themselves. Children will stare at their impossibly large wingspans, their cathedral scale, rib cages, their predatory perfection, and wonder what kind of air could have supported such dreams made flesh. But here, in the deep time of geological sleep, they are not museum pieces, but living memory, not extinct species, but continuing presences that haunt every breath drawn in atmosphere their deaths helped create. Their decomposition fed the chemistry of later worlds. Their carbon bodies became the coal that would someday power industrial revolutions. Their calcium shells became the limestone that would build cathedrals to gods the giants never knew. The irony whispers through their voices like wind through empty cathedrals. They who died of breathing too richly have become the fuel for machines that burn their bodies to make new air, new abundance, new opportunities for new giants to rise and learn the same lessons about the dangers of success. Feel them in the oil that flows black and thick through underground rivers, the petroleum that once coursed through the veins of marine giants, creatures that swam through seas so rich with dissolved oxygen that water itself became a medium for miracles. Their liquid bodies now fuel the engines of later empires, their ancient energy-powering machines that exhale new forms of abundance into skies, learning once again to grow thick with possibility and danger. The natural gas that hisses through underground chambers carries their breath in molecular form: methane that once bubbled from the decay of abundance, hydrogen that once bonded with carbon in the tissues of titans, compounds that preserve the actual exhalations of the age of giants, their final breaths captured and stored in stone lungs that beat to the rhythm of geological time. But listen more carefully, and you can hear something else in their voices, not just grief for what was lost, but warnings for what might come again. The ghosts of abundance whisper of cycles, of the eternal return of prosperity and collapse, of worlds that learn to breathe too deeply and forget the necessity of restraint. They speak of atmospheric tipping points, of chemistry driven past equilibrium, by the innocent enthusiasm of organisms, doing what they do best, growing, breathing, succeeding until success becomes catastrophe. Their voices carry the wisdom of experiencing what happens when life gets too good at living, when abundance becomes abundant enough to poison itself. In the deepest coal seams, where pressure has transformed even their voices into diamond clarity, the whispers become songs, the songs become symphonies, the symphonies become prayers for balance, for moderation, for the kind of breathing that can continue for geological ages, rather than burning bright and brief in the thin air of temporary perfection. Their ghosts rise with every exhalation of later worlds, invisible passengers in every breath, reminders that the air itself is haunted by the dreams of giants, who learned too late that even gods must learn to breathe carefully, or risk choking on their own abundance. The coal burns, the limestone weathers, the shale crumbles, but their voices continue, woven into the very chemistry of atmosphere, part of every breath drawn by every creature that inherits the world they built and destroyed with equal magnificence. They are the ghosts of air itself, the spirits of breathing made visible only in the fossil record of their mistakes, the whispered warnings of abundance that echo through deep time in frequencies only the stone can hear, and only the silence can translate. In the quiet spaces where catastrophe has swept clean, where the debris of abundance has settled into soil, and the ghosts of giants have whispered themselves into stone, something small and patient begins to stir. Not the explosive return of life reclaiming dominion, but the gentle resurrection of balance, learning to breathe again. A single-celled organism divides in a pool of water that reflects grey sky instead of brass. This is not the revolutionary cyanobacteria that once poisoned the ancient world with oxygen, nor the desperate survivor clinging to life in the aftermath of empire. This is something new, a microbial diplomat, a cellular peacemaker that has learned the art of breathing without conquest, of photosynthesis without revolution. Its chlorophyll captures sunlight with measured restraint, processing carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen in careful doses that feed the atmosphere without overwhelming it. Each breath is calculated, each exhalation weighed against the total atmospheric budget, each act of creation balanced against the necessity of not creating too much, too fast, too abundantly for the world to absorb. Watch how it divides not with the explosive enthusiasm of organisms drunk on unlimited resources, but with the thoughtful precision of life that has inherited the memory of what happens when success becomes excess. Each daughter cell carries within its molecular structure the accumulated wisdom of 3 billion years of atmospheric experimentation, the genetic knowledge of how to thrive without toxifying. Around the pool, other small resurrections unfold, with the patience of organisms that have learned to think in geological time. A moss begins its slow spread across the weathered surface of a fallen giant. Its simple cells, extracting nutrients from rock and air, with the efficiency of systems designed by failure, refined by catastrophe, perfected by the necessity of living within rather than beyond the means of their world. The moss breathes with the rhythm of sustainability, inhaling carbon dioxide at the rate the atmosphere can spare it, exhaling oxygen at the rate the world can use it, maintaining the delicate chemistry of renewal without triggering the chain reactions that lead to abundance, gigantism, and ultimately, collapse. Above the moss, a fern unfurls its first frond since the long winter ended. This fern is not the cathedral-scale giant that once reached toward brass skies with architectural ambition, but something appropriately sized, proportioned to the atmospheric reality of a world learning to breathe carefully. Its leaves process sunlight with the conservative efficiency of evolution, taught by extinction, growth guided by the memory of falling. Each unfurling leaflet adds its voice to the growing chorus of atmospheric renewal, but quietly, modestly, without the triumphant exhalations that once made the air thick enough to swim through. This is breathing as meditation rather than breathing as conquest, photosynthesis as sustainable practice rather than revolutionary transformation. The chemistry of renewal spreads through water and soil and air with the patient precision of systems that have learned the mathematics of balance. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria establish relationships with plant roots that are partnerships rather than parasitism, exchanges that benefit both participants without degrading the larger system that supports them. These are ecosystems designed by failure, communities that have learned from the fossil record of their predecessors' mistakes. Each organism knows its place in the atmospheric budget. Each species maintains its population within sustainable limits. Each breath contributes to the total without overwhelming the whole. In streams that run clear through the ruins of abundance, algae bloom in patterns that speak of restraint learned through catastrophe. They photosynthesize with the discipline of organisms that have inherited the knowledge of what happens when primary productivity exceeds the atmosphere's ability to process the results. Their growth follows mathematical curves that approach, but never exceed the carrying capacity of their environment. Fish return to these waters, not the giants that once swam through air thick as syrup, but creatures scaled to the reality of balanced chemistry, adapted to both aquatic and atmospheric environments that maintain themselves within sustainable parameters. They breathe with gills that extract oxygen efficiently but not greedily, that take what they need without depleting the dissolved gases that other creatures require. Above the water, insects begin their own careful renaissance. These are not the meter-wide dragonflies that once ruled skies thick enough to support impossible beauty, but smaller flyers whose wing beats are calculated to the atmospheric density actually available rather than the density they might wish for. They hunt with the precision of predators that have learned the energy economics of balanced ecosystems, claiming territories measured by sustainability rather than ambition, pursuing prey that maintains the population dynamics of recovery rather than the explosive growth that leads to collapse. The soil itself begins to breathe with renewed purpose. Fungi establish networks that connect root systems in cooperative webs of nutrient exchange, creating underground democracies where resources flow according to need rather than competitive advantage. These mycorrhizal partnerships process the decomposing remains of the age of giants with the respectful efficiency of recycling systems that waste nothing and hoard nothing. Tree seedlings begin to emerge from this rich earth descendants of the giants, but genetically edited by extinction to grow within atmospheric limits rather than beyond them. They reach toward the grey sky with the measured ambition of organisms that have learned to calculate the cost of height, the atmospheric burden of excessive photosynthesis, the price of breathing too richly for the world to bear. Their growth follows new patterns, not the exponential expansion of abundance, drunk on unlimited resources, but the sigmoid curves of sustainable development, the mathematical poetry of systems that approach equilibrium rather than exceeding it. The atmospheric chemistry itself begins to stabilize around new set points. Oxygen levels hover at percentages that support complex life without enabling gigantism, that permit fire without guaranteeing conflagration, that allow breathing without making the air thick enough to intoxicate entire ecosystems. Carbon dioxide finds its own balance between the needs of photosynthesis and the constraints of atmospheric chemistry, cycling through biological and geological systems with the rhythm of a world that has learned to breathe in harmony with its own limitations. This is the breath returning not as the explosive exhalation of abundance reclaiming dominion, but as the measured inhalation of balance learning to sustain itself. Each breath is a vote for sustainability, each exhalation a commitment to living within the means of the atmospheric commons. The grey sky begins to show hints of deeper blue, not the transparent clarity of catastrophic thinness, but the rich colour of air that has learned to hold just enough moisture, just enough life, just enough possibility to support complex beauty without supporting the kind of excess that leads to collapse. In this balanced breathing, new kinds of beauty emerge, not the impossible magnificence of giants drunk on abundance, but the deeper beauty of systems that can sustain themselves for geological ages, ecosystems that have learned to thrive within, rather than despite their atmospheric limitations. The breath returns as whispered promise, rather than shouted proclamation, as sustainable hope rather than unsustainable ambition, as the gentle resurrection of a world that has finally learned the difference between breathing and burning. In the cities that gleam like scattered jewelry across the dark surface of a later world, a different kind of breathing fills the air. Smokestacks breathe out the carbon bodies of ancient giants, releasing in moments of industrial exhalation the compressed sunlight that took millions of years to accumulate. The ghosts of abundance rise once more into atmosphere, their fossil voices carried on plumes of smoke that paint new patterns, across skies, learning once again to thicken with possibility. Watch from the perspective of deep time, as the newest children of atmospheric abundance construct their own cathedrals of steel and glass, their own monuments to the mathematics of success, multiplying beyond sustainable limits. These builders walk upright on two legs instead of flowing on countless segments, think with neurons instead of simple cellular responses. But their relationship with the air they breathe follows patterns older than consciousness, rhythms deeper than intention. They burn the diamond-scaled giants in their furnaces, releasing the hoarded breath of carboniferous forests into skies that grow heavy once again, with the accumulated exhalations of photosynthesis. Coal becomes smoke, becomes carbon dioxide, becomes the raw material for new abundance, new growth, new opportunities, for atmospheric chemistry to experiment with the dangerous gift of too much success. The forests that once breathed out liquid gold have been compressed into black rivers of energy that flow through the veins of industrial civilization. Each ton of coal burned releases the equivalent of acres of ancient breathing, decades of photosynthetic accumulation, the concentrated essence of trees that grew drunk on oxygen and died of their own abundance. But these new children of air do not burn only the bodies of giants. They have learned to extract the breath of marine creatures. From deep earth petroleum that once flowed through the tissues of sea-dwelling titans, oil that carries in its molecular structure the memory of abundance, flowing through oceanic ecosystems, where everything grew larger than physics should have allowed. Natural gas hisses through pipelines like the final exhalations of decomposed abundance. Methane, that once bubbled from the decay of impossible forests, now burning in the hearths of creatures that have never seen a dragonfly with a 6-foot wingspan, or breathed air thick enough to intoxicate entire ecosystems. The irony whispers through every combustion engine, every power plant, every flame that converts fossil patience into kinetic impatience. These newest children of atmospheric experimentation are burning the bodies of their predecessors to create the very conditions that led to their predecessors' extinction, air growing rich with carbon dioxide, atmosphere thickening with the accumulated exhalations of industrial photosynthesis. In their laboratories, they study the fossil record of abundance and collapse with the detached curiosity of observers who do not yet recognize themselves in the patterns they catalogue. They reconstruct the skeletons of giants, measure the atmospheric chemistry of ancient worlds, calculate the oxygen content that made monsters possible, all while burning the compressed remains of those monsters to power the machines that enable their research. The cities themselves begin to breathe with the rhythm of industrial metabolism, inhaling raw materials and exhaling waste products, in cycles that accelerate beyond the natural rhythms of atmospheric chemistry. Factories process the Earth's stored energy faster than ecosystems can replenish it, creating abundance at rates that echo the exponential growth curves of cyanobacteria, learning to poison ancient seas with oxygen. But these children of air have developed something their predecessors lacked: the capacity for conscious reflection, the ability to study their own impact on atmospheric chemistry and recognize the patterns that have played out before in deep time. They can read the warning signs written in coal seams and limestone, can decipher the fossil testimony of abundance becoming catastrophe. In their universities, scholars trace the connections between atmospheric chemistry and extinction events, mapping the correlation between oxygen levels and gigantism, between carbon dioxide concentrations and mass die-offs. They learn to read the rock record as a chronicle of breathing becoming dangerous, of success becoming suicide, of abundance learning its own limitations through collapse. Some among them begin to whisper warnings that echo the voices of ghosts trapped in coal, cautionary tales about the mathematics of exponential growth, about the atmospheric consequences of burning 300 million years of stored sunlight in 300 years of industrial enthusiasm. They speak of tipping points and feedback loops, of chemistry driven past equilibrium by the innocent enthusiasm of organisms doing what they do best: growing, consuming, succeeding until success becomes its own enemy. Their voices carry the same urgency that once drove the last dragonfly to fold its wings, the same recognition that even abundance has limits, even atmospheric chemistry has breaking points. But the patterns play out with the inexorable logic of systems that reward immediate advantage over long-term sustainability. The machines that burn fossil patience to create contemporary abundance continue their work with the mechanical precision of cyanobacteria, exhaling oxygen into ancient seas, unconscious of the cumulative impact of their individual contributions to atmospheric transformation. The air above their cities begins to taste different, not yet the liquid gold of carboniferous abundance, but something richer than the balanced breathing that followed the Great Collapse. Carbon dioxide concentrations climb with each passing year, each burned forest, each exhaled breath of industrial civilization learning to breathe in excess of atmospheric equilibrium. In their mirrors, if they knew how to look, they might see the reflection of earlier experiments in abundance, the same exponential enthusiasm, the same confidence in unlimited growth, the same innocent unawareness of their own cumulative impact on the chemistry that supports all breathing. They are beautiful in their complexity, these newest children of atmospheric experimentation, as beautiful as the bronze-winged dragonflies that once ruled skies thick enough to swim through. They have learned to transform matter into energy with even greater efficiency than their fossil predecessors, to extract abundance from earth and air and water, with technologies that would seem magical to any earlier age. But beauty, like abundance, can become dangerous when it exceeds the carrying capacity of the systems that support it. The atmospheric chemistry that enables their magnificence begins to show the same signs of stress that preceded earlier, collapses concentrations, building beyond equilibrium points, feedback loops beginning to accelerate, the patient chemistry of earth and air learning once again what happens when breathing becomes burning. They are the newest experiment in the eternal dialogue between life and atmosphere, the latest iteration of the ancient conversation about how much success a world can sustain before success becomes catastrophe. Their story is still being written in the atmospheric chemistry they exhale with every breath, every fire, every combustion that converts fossil memory into contemporary momentum. The mirror of deep time reflects their image back to them, in the form of coal seams and limestone layers, fossil testimony to earlier experiments in abundance that learned too late the mathematics of atmospheric limitation. Whether they will recognize themselves in that reflection, whether they will learn from the whispered warnings of ghosts trapped in stone, remains to be written in the chemistry of air that grows thicker with each passing year. And so we return, you and I, to this moment of quiet breathing, to the space between inhale and exhale, where all stories converge and all time becomes present. Feel the air entering your lungs now: 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen, traces of argon and carbon dioxide and water vapor, the precise mixture that sustains consciousness, capable of contemplating its own breathing. This air you breathe carries within its molecular structure the memory of everything we have witnessed together. Each oxygen atom has flowed through the respiratory systems of giants, has been exhaled by club moss cathedrals reaching toward brass skies, has burned in the metabolic fires of dragonflies the size of ravens, has participated in the patient chemistry of abundance, becoming catastrophe, becoming balance, becoming abundance, once more. The nitrogen that fills the spaces between your thoughts has witnessed the rise and fall of atmospheric empires, has carried the whispered voices of ghosts compressed into coal, has been present for every transformation from reducing chemistry to oxidizing chemistry, and back again through the eternal cycles of breathing and being breathed that define life's relationship with air. Breathe slowly now, and taste the iron in this atmosphere, not the metallic flavor of ancient seas, heavy with dissolved metal, but the subtle signature of star death recycled through biological systems, the distant echo of supernovas that forge the elements of blood and breath, and the hemoglobin that carries oxygen through vessels, evolved for atmospheric conditions that change more slowly than consciousness, but faster than wisdom. This air once killed gods. These same molecules of oxygen that now flow through your circulatory system, with perfect biocompatibility, once burned through the cellular membranes of archaea that had ruled the earth for 3 billion years, once poisoned purple seas, with the revolutionary toxin of photosynthesis, once made the atmosphere so rich with fire that lightning strikes became conflagrations that burned for geological ages. The carbon dioxide you exhale with each breath joins the atmospheric conversation that has been continuing for 4 billion years, adding your voice to the chorus of breathing that includes every microbe that ever learned to process light, every plant that ever transformed sunlight into sugar, every animal that ever discovered the alchemy of extracting energy from the patient chemistry of organic molecules. Your exhalation becomes part of the global respiratory system, the planetary breathing that connects every photosynthetic cell in every forest, with every combustion engine in every city, every breath drawn by every creature, with every volcanic vent that still exhales the deep chemistry of the Earth's molten heart. Feel yourself as part of this larger breathing, this atmospheric meditation that encompasses geological time and molecular space, that connects your individual metabolism with the cumulative metabolism of biosphere, learning to sustain itself within the constraints of chemistry and physics and the mathematical poetry of sustainable systems. You are breathing the same air that sustained the giants, that carried the voices of bronze-winged predators through green cathedrals, that grew so thick with abundance, it became dangerous to the very organisms that created it. But you are also breathing air that learned from catastrophe, that found balance through collapse, that discovered the difference between burning and breathing through the hard experience of excess. In the rhythm of your breathing, the patterns of deep time become present. Inhale the memory of ancient abundance. Exhale the wisdom of learned moderation. Inhale the beauty of giants drunk on atmospheric plenty. Exhale the knowledge that even giants must learn the mathematics of sustainability or face the consequences of their own success. Your breath connects you to the eternal experiment in atmospheric chemistry that includes every form of life that has ever learned to extract energy from air, every organism that has contributed to the slow transformation of reducing atmosphere to oxidizing atmosphere, to balanced atmosphere, and back again through cycles that measure their duration in hundreds of millions of years. The air grows quiet around you now, settling into the peaceful rhythm of systems that have learned to live within their means, atmospheres that have discovered the secret of sustaining complexity without generating the kind of abundance that becomes toxic to its own foundation. Listen to the silence between your heartbeats, the pause between inhalation and exhalation, the moment of stillness that exists at the center of every breath. In that silence, all the voices we have heard whisper their final wisdom, that balance is the only true immortality, that moderation is the only sustainable abundance, that learning to breathe carefully is the only way to breathe at all for geological ages. The ghosts of giants settle into the quiet spaces of your consciousness, their voices becoming part of your own breathing, their memory carried forward in the molecular poetry of air that remembers everything, forgives everything, sustains everything that learns to work within rather than against the chemistry that makes all life possible. Your breath slows, deepens, becomes synchronized with the planetary breathing that encompasses forests and oceans, and the slow respiration of rocks weathering into soil, minerals cycling through biological systems, elements dancing, the eternal dance of matter, becoming energy, becoming matter once more through transformations, too slow for individual perception, but perfectly visible to the patient observation of geological time. And in this moment of perfect breathing, this balance between taking and giving, between inhaling the gift of atmospheric complexity and exhaling the contribution of conscious participation in the global respiratory system, you become part of the story we have been telling together, the eternal story of life. Learning to breathe, learning to balance abundance with sustainability, learning to create beauty that can endure, not just for moments, but for eons. The last breath becomes the first breath, becomes every breath, and in that breathing, the silence speaks of cycles that continue, balances that endure, and the patient wisdom of air that has learned to sustain consciousness capable of contemplating its own place in the vast respiratory system of a living world. Breathe slowly, breathe carefully. Breathe with the knowledge that this air once killed gods and now sustains the dreams of creatures capable of learning from the fossil record of their predecessors' magnificent mistakes. The story ends as it began, with breathing. But now the breathing carries the memory of everything that came before, the wisdom of balance, learned through excess, the quiet knowledge that even the act of drawing breath connects us to the deepest patterns of time and change, and the eternal conversation between life and the atmosphere that makes all life possible. In the silence that follows the story, your breathing continues the conversation, adding your voice to the atmospheric chorus that began with the first exhalation of the first organism that learned to transform light into life, and continues with every breath you take in air that remembers everything, sustains everything, and connects everything in the web of relationships that we call the living world. Breathe and remember. The air itself is memory, and memory, like breath, is the foundation of all life that endures.